Hey, what's going on everybody? In this video we're going to talk about making Android games, and we're going to be using Unity 3D to do this. So if you don't know about Unity, you could go ahead and check the link in the video description, download that. There's going to be a few things that we're going to need to download to start making games. So you're probably going to want to have an Android device to test on, or you can use an emulator. I'm going to be using my actual device. That's what I use. I don't really like emulators, but if you don't have anything and you're just trying to learn and test some things out, an emulator is a good way to start, and you could actually learn a lot when you're using an emulator. So go ahead and download Unity, get that all set up, and then you're going to need to download the Android SDK for Windows. I'm using Windows 7 64-bit, so go ahead and follow that download link and get that installed. The next thing you're going to need for your Android SDK is a JDK. So follow this link and get your JDK for 64-bit and for 86. 86 is 32, if that makes sense. I used both of those, and I'll explain why I did that in just a minute. The last thing you're going to need is drivers for whatever device you're going to be testing on. So go ahead and download your drivers, and then you're going to need to configure a few settings on your actual device, like USB debugging, and I think there might be some kind of setting for developer mode or non-Play Store applications or something along those lines. If you get stuck and you can't figure it out, you can ask me, or Google should be able to definitely help you there. So go ahead and get all that stuff downloaded and set up, and then you're going to want to open Unity. So you just create a new project if you don't have one, and then once Unity loads, there's going to be a couple things you're going to need to set up. So all the stuff that we just downloaded, install your JDK for 86 and for 64. Also install your USB driver. The ADT bundle for Windows, go ahead and extract that, and then you're going to have a copy of that folder extracted. So you could go ahead and go inside this folder, and this is your SDK, and this is basically what you're configuring, and you're going to point Unity to this SDK. And if you open your SDK manager really quick, now the reason I installed 64 and 32-bit Java is if I only installed 64-bit, I wouldn't be able to open my SDK manager. So the only way I would be able to do that is through Eclipse, but I'm not using Eclipse, so I installed the 32-bit Java, and I'm able to open my SDK manager without Eclipse. So I already have my SDK manager open. Now I'm going to talk about what this does really quick. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but there's not really a whole lot to explain here, other than basically, if you haven't heard about what APIs are, basically an API level is, in a nutshell, it's the operating system level for an Android device, or the hardware level, something along those lines. Anyway, I'm using a Samsung Galaxy S2, so that's what I'm going to use as an example. I'm API level 10, so I have all of those installed. What you're going to want to install is an API that's appropriate for whatever platform your target application is. And you'll do some research and figure out what that is. Whatever device you have is probably what your target application is going to be for. You may want to go a little bit lower, but you can research what API level your device is and just build to that. So you would select the checkboxes for your API level, and then let me shrink this down a little. And then there's an install package button, so you would just install the API packages for the level that you want. In addition to that, you're also going to want to go down to extras. And you can install all of these if you want. It'll take a while, and you may not need all of them, so you may not want to install all of them in the beginning. I would recommend installing them as you need them. The one thing that you will need is your Google USB driver, so just make sure that's set up. Aside from that, the tools that we're using right now is 22.6.1. Yeah, so just make sure everything's all up to date for where you're at right now. You don't need to install all of the APIs, only install what your target platform is. So once you have that set up, your SDK manager set up. This folder is basically what the SDK manager is configuring. So all that stuff that you download is all configured in here. So now that that's all set, actually, what we need to do is copy the location of this folder. Now we need to tell Unity where it's at. So if we go to Edit, Preferences, and External Tools, now I already have told Unity where my SDK location is, but you haven't yet. So just click in this box, and up in the top address bar, go ahead and paste in the location of where your SDK folder is, and then go ahead and select that folder. Okay, well, I already have mine selected, but so now once you have that selected, you're basically, as long as everything's installed, you're ready to start making Android applications. So one of the things that we can do really quickly, I guess I'll use this as an example. Let's actually just go ahead and import standard assets mobile. And we're going to talk about some different things that we can do. There's tons of different options when you're starting a mobile project. So this is just one way that we can start. I'm also going to talk about standard assets beta, and just a lot of different things that we can do to start an Android application. So if we expand this folder, let's see, there should be, okay, here's our control setups. So these are all the different scenes that we have that we can play with. Alright, so we're going to open the camera relative control setup. Then if we switch the tab over to the game view up at the top, now one of the things that I have is I have Unity Remote, which allows me to control the Unity editor on my Android device. So you can actually go to the Google Play Store and you could download this, and it basically, any buttons that you were to put on the screen or any touches that you were to use, so obviously all the code that you're going to write for your game that's going to be using touch controls, or things along those lines, that you would be able to test that without actually having to push the application to your device. So it's really useful. So I recommend installing the Unity Remote on your device. So I'm controlling this with my phone right now. So now we essentially have functionality. So if I were to say, go to File, Build Settings, and then I were to add the scene to my build settings, switch my platform to Android, and then I were to do a build and run, I would go ahead and give it a name. And now it's actually pushing the application to my device. I guess I have to set up some bundle identifier information, so we'll go ahead and we'll do that really quick. So if we go to the, basically when we go to the player settings, that's the way we access this. So if we weren't in this menu, you would just go to your build settings, player settings, select your Android tab, and then you could scroll through this. You could set up all the different characteristics of your application. If you have Unity Pro, you have a lot more flexibility with the splash image. Other than that, you want to name your application. So this is the naming convention or the syntax that it would use. So you would just change it to your company name. I'm going to use turn the game on. And I'll just call it test. And I'll put the same thing up there. So now that I've set up my information for my application, I'll talk a little bit more about this in the future as we actually build some cool stuff and you're ready to push this stuff out. But I'll definitely be making a video that talks more in depth about that. I just want to get something that's can be pushed to my device really quickly. But now that I have all of the bundle identifier information set up, it should just go straight to my device and then it'll start up. And if you were following along and you installed everything that I did and you have your device configured so that you can install these types of applications, it should just pop right up for you and you've essentially just built your first application. But what you'll notice is that it's in portrait view. So right now, let me actually change a few things. So if I were to go back to build settings and I were to go to player settings, resolution and presentation, we want to change that to landscape left, just because it'll look a little bit nicer. Or this is actually a good way for you to see how you want to build your game or whatever you're building. But with this control setup, it's meant for a landscape type setup, so we're going to change that to landscape. And one other thing that I'll show you really quick, so I'm using the Galaxy S2 and my screen resolution is 800 by 480, so that's actually what I'm going to select. So now in my game view, I'm able to see exactly what my screen will look like on my Android device. If you want to get started and check out some more types of scenes besides these control setups, one of the things that you can do is go to the Unity Asset Store and get the standard assets beta. Or sample assets beta. So go ahead and download that. I'm going to get that all set up. I'll go ahead and do that on my own time. But that's what we'll be talking about in the next video.